Christmas Carol came about because I think that people felt that, innocently as players, felt that pantos had kind of seen their day. The last few pantos they'd done had lost them a lot of money, and I think that although production values and acting and everything in those pantos was incredibly high, but to produce a panto is a very sort of expensive thing. And so what they wanted was a play that essentially was cheap to do, and but would still be entertaining and make them money for their plays during the year. I had read Christmas Carol, obviously, and everyone, I knew knew the story of Christmas Carol. But when it was eventually chosen that that was the play they were going to do, I adapted the script based on lots of things. I watched various productions of it. I read the children's versions of it and the adult versions of it. And originally, it was going to be a much more interactive affair. It was going to be the narrator walking in and amongst the audience and sitting down next to audience members and, talking to them directly, which was the idea. And that's where the thing about doing it in the round and on the stage came in, because I knew that when we get to Buckton, which was a much smaller stage, that we're going to need more room, because this had a huge cast in it. So I think it took me around about 2 months to write the script and another month to kind of just refine it and tweak it and sort it all out, basically. And I think there ended up being about 8 drafts. The auditions were really fun. We had a huge turnout, and we had loads and loads of new people come. And you never pre-cast. I never pre-casted in my head as to who was going to be what in what role. I had some ideas, but generally it was a free-for-all. The narrator's part was hotly contested. A lot of people wanted that part because essentially, apart from Scrooge, it was the biggest part in it, and I would, still today say it was the lead sort of role, if you like. Basically, with that part, Linda Collins, who ended up playing the narrator, I never thought about Linda at all, really, and her auditions were okay. But I had called her and about 3 or 4 others. I wanted to try out different accents, and I thought that knowing that most of the other leads would be male, to have a female narrator was a really good idea and a lovely contrast, and I think Linda did an absolutely superb job. Casting Lol as Scrooge, I actually had a run of different Scrooges. That I had my selection of about 3, probably realistically 4 or 5 really good Scrooges. But Lol came to rehearsals and he gave me this attitude of, well, if I get a part, I'll get a part, and if I don't get a part, I'll don't get a part. And he showed me lots of sort of emotions in the auditions, probably more than he thinks. And as I knew that Scrooge was going to be an emotional journey, that's the reason why he got the part. Originally, Wolfie Hammerbacker was Bob Cratchit, an American, really great American guy who was going to try a British accent. But he had to pull out, and so immediately I thought, well, who could play that role really, really well? And Adam Hillier I had seen in several other productions, and I knew he was good. And so I offered him the role, and he turned out to be absolutely fantastic. But Robbie Britton stood out as being a terrific cast member. He was brand new to the players, as a lot of people were. And he came into the auditions full of excitement and very loud and boisterous, and and I just immediately knew he was going to be Fred. Lawrence and Julie Allwright, originally these were 2 male parts, but I changed Mr. Foster to Mrs. Foster because I felt that they could rehearse at home, they could work out how they were going to play it together, and I think they were brilliant, really. Jacob Marley was always going to be Richard Finn. He was probably the only one that I had more or less precast, because I had thought, gosh, could it be Scrooge? But Richard has this huge stage presence, and I thought he would be the only one disciplined enough to lie on that thing for 45 minutes before the play even started. He would be the only one who could give me that loud, boisterous, angry performance that Marley was. I knew Mel was going to be ghost past the second she walked in the door. She came up to me and introduced herself to me, and she had a very light voice, and I thought, oh, that's the sort of voice I'm looking for ghost past. But is she good enough? And during the auditions it came out, yeah, she was absolutely brilliant. Incidentally, her sister Liz also auditioned, and I did give her a carol singer's role, but sadly she had to pull out. Melina La Forense, who played Belle, just played it with such grace, and that's what I was looking for in my Belle. So, grace. Again, Melina wasn't the original actress. Actually, I'd cast an actress called Nicola Kelly who had to pull out, and Melina, I just thought, came in and played it with such excitement. And again, Melina's a very gentle person, and that's how I saw Belle, a very gentle person. Ghost Present was a very Brian Blessed sort of character. That's how I pitched it, and I knew Ian Francis could do that. I knew he could, and he grew a beard and everything, and him and Shan came into the rehearsals. It's like, we have read the script, we love it, it's so fantastic. And sadly it didn't guarantee them a part, but but gosh, they were really good. And you know, I know Shan particularly, when I cast her as Angela, she was like, why did you cast me as Angela, you know, why not Mrs. Cratchit? But she was right for that part. And in the foursome of Robbie and Shan and Martin and Katie, I just knew those four would work terrifically well together. I should mention the kids, particularly Matilda Hames, who played Belinda Cratchit. She had to go on stage one night without James Allwright, who played Peter. James was fantastic, really good, and she rewrote the dialogue in her head. And you know, I think that's the mark of a true professional actress, that when you're a child of 12 years old and you're able to do that and cope with that situation seconds before you're due to go on stage, I think is no, you know, it's not an easy task. And I think she was excellent. I should also mention Zach and Tom as the Tiny Tims. Zach had the singing voice and the great acting ability to be Tiny Tim, but didn't quite look Tiny Tim. Whereas Tom looked Tiny Tim, but wasn't a great singer. But I thought they did an excellent job, and Tom had such enthusiasm, it was fantastic. I'd invited Matt Dilley and Simon Yap, Simon coming from the Glyndebourne Opera House and Matt being a really good friend of mine, brilliant sound mixer, to be the technical on this show. Simon just approached it with such enthusiasm and with this infectious sense of humour. And he approached the role, he approached the lighting with such enthusiasm and excitement. Was there on time, was incredibly professional, and didn't get at all fed up with my constant changing direction. Matt Dilley on the sound suffered terribly from a really bad ill sickness, as most of the cast did. I've never known a cast to barf so much. But Matt was really ill during the production, during the actual shows of Christmas Carol. But in a true pro style, he continued on, and I admired him so much for that. And I remember driving over to his house late one night. It must have been midnight or something, and we went through till something like 1 or 2 in the morning, working out all the different sounds. It was brilliant. I should also mention Jonathan Shadlock. John was always going to be my stage manager from day one. He approached the role with such infectious enthusiasm, and I love working with him, and I hope to work with him again. He and his team are so fun to work with, and that's ultimately what I wanted. I wanted backstage to send out the right sort of attitude, you know, that things were going to be fun. And I think they made it fun for all the new people backstage. Georgie Fye, who was just the world's best props person, and Susan Smith, who just approached the costumes with such professionalism. Same with Tessa and Vivian, who did the makeup, and I thought the makeup was just wonderful. Ultimately, I thought the play itself was a huge success. It didn't have big elaborate sets, and that was because purely and simply we didn't have the money to do that. Once we chopped out the sort of main interaction role, the play just gelled completely together, and it is largely down to Lol and Linda who made that happen really, really well. My favourite scenes are Belle and Scrooge's dance together. If we had have had a younger man playing young Scrooge, it just wouldn't have worked. And I don't think the audience would have connected with Scrooge in the way that I wanted them to. I wanted them to love, hate, admire this character. And the fact that they didn't touch whilst dancing, I thought was just terrific. And the next scene they did on the stairs, and he gets to relive the pain of not being with Belle anymore, I thought was just so beautifully played by Lol, and could not have been played better by another actor. Of course it could have been, but then Lol would have just stood in the background and just watched, and for the audience I think that actually that would have been very boring. The Cratchit scenes, I think, pull at the heartstrings, which is exactly what they were meant to do, but they were almost underplayed slightly, which was brilliant. And I thought Linda's narration in that sequence where they all have dinner was just terrific. And I had a very clear idea of how they were going to be. And also Tiny Tim's death scene, which is written slightly differently in the book. I added an awful lot to the script of Christmas Carol. I wanted to wrap up the fan storyline, which he had sort of started in Act 1 with him meeting his sister, and then continued in Act 2 when you connect that Fred is her son, and he regrets not having one last hug from fans. So I had to write that into the end of Act 3, and the only way I could do it was to bring the ghosts back. I directed it with passion, enthusiasm, excitement, everything that I believe firmly, as my years in television directing shows, I believe that this attitude of this is going to be the best thing you've ever been in should start at the top and work its way down. It is something I'd learned in drama. If the person who is leading you is excited about what they're doing and very enthusiastic about what they're doing, then it will filter down into the cast. And I strongly believe that you'll get it back in the long run. And not only did I get it back through their performances, through everyone's performances, children and adult cast alike, and crew, not only did I get it back, but I also felt that everyone had a really good time both on stage and off stage.